Today I wanted to speak about the function of the intellect, which is a section in the book of Barry Long's The Origins of Man in the Universe book. This part is on page 249, 250 and 251, and it's the degradation of the intellect. Everything in existence comes out of the eternal intellect, and the eternal intellect replicates itself down through all the worlds downwards towards the physical. Although degraded by the descent through the psyche into matter, the cohesion and harmony of the reality is relatively maintained and holds each of the worlds below together. Our immediate demonstration of this is the cohesion and harmony of nature. Below the eternal intellect is the stellar intellect, the intellect of the Lord of existence. Next, from our point of view, is the solar intellect. This is then followed by the terrestrial intellect and finally the human intellect. The human intellect consists of all the materialistic concepts we have formed of the world and all our emotional and false impressions of life, which men and women have held to and repeated from generation to generation for thousands of years. It could be called a subconscious common memory, but in relation to truth, it's a garbage tip. In material terms, it includes our concepts, which are degradations of ideas, to do with money and business, theoretical science, recreational drugs, and the practical activities that build the world as we now know it. In emotional terms, the human intellect includes the notion, which is also a degradation of an idea, that the death of the body is the end of life, that love is personal and a personal feeling, that beliefs are somehow real, that there's virtue in worldly position and power over others, and so on. The continual use of the human intellect gives rise to insecurity, worry, fear, violence, and self-doubt, particularly where love is concerned. The reason for this is that the human intellect is the creation of man, and that all the intellects above are part of the cosmic order of creation. Everyone using the human intellect will at times reflect off the terrestrial intellect. These will be moments of unfamiliar clarity and intimations of a greater reality. But usually they will be quickly covered over by emotional feelings, thought or talk, and the virtue of the moment will be lost. By constantly reflecting on the human intellect, man reaffirms its erroneous notions and materialistic concepts and so perpetuates his personal stress, worry, fear, conflict, and anxieties. For here is repeated once again the cosmic law that says that nothing can exist unless it is perceived or acknowledged by intelligence. When man thinks negatively or emotionally, his intelligence is affirming those negative notions in the human intellect. Similarly, when a man concerns himself with purely materialistic concepts and drives, he affirms his own vulnerability to loss and the misery of dying. With most men doing the same thing most of the time, these notions have become fixed and substantive and a deeply destructive way of living. The spiritual or holy life begins when a man starts to refuse to give in to the almost irresistible urge to identify with the human intellect. By not allowing his intelligence to reflect on its negativity, the destructive emotions and thoughts start to disappear for him. He engages in the same practical activities perhaps, but without seeing them as an end in themselves. As this happens, he begins to see through the terrestrial intellect and reflect off that. And from there, it's only a matter of time, perhaps a long, long time, before he is reflecting on the solar intellect above it as well. Although the human intellect is practically all negative in relation to truth, it has some positive values in a dual way, such as kindness, generosity, compassion, patience, and giving. As worthy as these qualities in our sensory existence seem to be, they are nevertheless degradations of the idea of love held in the terrestrial intellect above the human intellect. Real love, living love, is all that is good. There is no other words for it. It embraces and replaces every seemingly virtuous description. The ideas in the terrestrial intellect relate to truth, beauty, harmony, order, and rightness. By regularly perceiving and acknowledging these, a man activates them, and his life starts to reflect that harmony. But since most men seldomly have time for such acknowledgement, the ideas remain weak, not easily discerned, and therefore fail to change the life of the majority. When an idea is not used sufficiently, it starts to fade and lose luminosity, in the same way as negative emotions if you do not acknowledge them. The more it is used or acknowledged, the more luminous these ideas become for the individual and for all men using the terrestrial intellect. The terrestrial intellect is not personal as the human intellect is. It determines our lives behind the scenes. The scenes are merely the emotional, ignorant, and largely unhappy world created on the surface of existence by the personal human intellect. So basically, this is a beautiful piece by Barry Long describing the intellects, the different levels of intellects, and the point that if one stops reflecting constantly on the persona, on the personal concepts and beliefs and all the thoughts and the scientific speculation and all the urge to try to work things out at a mental level, then the next level becomes the intellect of which we reflect, where the truer, higher levels of reality that are not man-made, but are actually, let's say, God-made or universe-made or cosmically made. So the organic, truest part of our creation, the non-created, eternal levels. And so it's a matter of acknowledging that which is true, which is right, which is blissful, which is honest, which is loving, instead of all the human, speculative, mind-made, man-made ideas, including those of compassion and helping out and trying to do all the things that everybody thinks is a great thing within the already degraded society. And although they do have their relative dual value, the truth is that the highest medicine is for one to stay still and silent so that the intelligence can start to reflect off of the higher intelligence of the terrestrial intellect, the level of the mirror, the uncontaminated mirror, the mirror that is not smudged and smeared with all the human concepts and belief structures and emotions that make the mirror not reflect reality, but reflect a distorted, screwed up, twisted version, which is the human intellect with all its garbage dip nonsense. So it's the only true evolution of man is for man to start getting out of the reflection of that mirror with human intellect and onto the terrestrial, the Gaia, the earth intellect, the higher level up. So that was another reading from The Origins of Man in the Universe with some of my comments. I always say read the book yourself. I'm only getting little snippets here and there that I'm reading. But of course, the coherence of the entire book read properly from beginning to end has a much more impact, much more profound impact if read properly and all the way through.